loves to play control decks in just about every format. He's playing blue-white where he's kind of just doing the setup shop, but it's not going to kill you all in one shot. So I don't know if this abides by the rules of Modern right now.
He is trying to eventually lock out the game with Planeswalkers, which is not a card type Grixis Death Shadow handles all that well. You also have Supreme Verdict. Supreme Verdict is very good at fighting, obviously, a deck with a bunch of creatures and counterspells and Inquisition of Kozilek.
Inquisition of Kozilek is where we're going to start this game from Julian John, as he's going to reduce his life total quite obviously because he's playing Death Shadow. Snapcaster Mage is going to go to the graveyard. So take a look at the rest of Ray's hand. He's got a Celestial Colonnade, a Jace Architect of Thought, a Cryptic Command, a Tectonic Edge, and it looks like a couple of copies of Flooded Strand. So it's a slow start here for the blue-white control player as he was able to keep 7 cards, and this is kind of the fast start that we see from Grixis Death Shadow.
Yeah, a threat card to on the table fast here for John will be excellent, as Perez is several turns away from defending himself. Which leads me to my first question of the podcast, which is, for how long can someone be a future pro?
A great question. A great question. I don't really know the terms of engagement with that.
It's more philosophical.
A Path to Exile to draw here for Perez, timely, as he's going to play a Colonnade and simply pass the turn back. That's our first of many questions here this weekend. How long can one be a future pro?
Path to Exile here, a really solid draw, although John, here with another Thoughtseize to follow up. Again, this is going to come down pretty quickly here, I think, to if John finds a threat card, is Perez able to defend himself for long enough? Because he's got something to play with here. His hand is also very soft to 2 threats without a sweeper. So just a couple creatures here from John, and this game could be done with very quickly.
And also Stubborn Denial is going to be a card that's good in this game too for John, as he takes a look at Perez's hand. Now Path to Exile is going to bite the dust, and it doesn't look like Julian has another land. Maybe he does. Maybe he does. He's already down to 13. Looks like he wants to play a land. There's a Water Grave on tap, down to 11. I thought he might have that enter the battlefield tap, but that's not what you're trying to do with this deck. And here is a Death Shadow that's going to be a 2/2. So we're going to go over to Ray Perez. His hand has been stripped. He'll play a Flooded Strand and simply pass the turn back. Didn't get a great look at what he drew for the turn. But this is kind of the recipe here for Death Shadow. We've seen it so many times here over the past couple of months.
Yep, and you can have a deck list like Perez's has that, you have good cards at all stages of the game, early and late, to defend yourself, but it's very hard to have all the pieces line up the right way when your hand is getting attacked like this.
Serum Visions here will allow Julian to draw a card. He'll split the difference on the scry, one on top, one on bottom. Death Shadow getting ready to come on in here, potentially. Looks like John is going to play a Thoughtseize first. You talk about getting your hand shredded. Well, Jace and Cryptic Command are the options here. And I think Cryptic's a pretty easy selection here for Julian John. He'll take that powerful blue spell and come in here with Death Shadow for 4. Perez is going to fall down to 16. Let's make it 15 with the Flooded Strand activation.
Yeah, this is not a game shaping up here where Perez is going to get any more than 1 activation out of Jace. So Cryptic, the much more powerful card of the 2.
Blue-White controls a deck that's been doing pretty well on Magic Online. You've got the new Gideon that might show up this game. Would be pretty good in this spot, honestly, but for Perez, he doesn't have it. Just going to play another Flooded Strand and pass the turn back. You did see him search up an Irrigated Farmland with that Flooded Strand last turn. But this is a deck that has been performing pretty well online, and for you control aficionados out there, if this is what you want to be doing in Modern, you can. Though I do question how good the matchup is here against Grixis Death Shadow. As you mentioned, when you're being Thoughtseize and Inquisition, your top deck's going to be pretty good.
Well, John here has had, about the best draw that you can line up here. Multiple discard spells, a Death Shadow on the second turn of the game. Perez had some very good tools here. I mean, if he was able to keep that path in hand, it's possible he would have had enough time to get to his 4s, and then he's really going. But, I mean, that is the nature of playing against a deck with this much discard.
Blood Crypt gets searched for. It's going to enter the battlefield untapped. So now Death Shadow is a 7/7. And now here's a Thought Scour. So 2 cards, Terminate, and Blood Crypt will go to the graveyard. And a Bloodstained Mire is the draw. Looks like Gurmag Angler may be in hand here for Julian. And he will play the very large Delve Fish. Gonna remove some of the cards in the graveyard here. And now he's got an additional large creature. Now, for Ray, Supreme Verdict is the best one. I think that much is pretty obvious.
He's right back in it.
Yeah. It's a question of if he can find it or not, because right now we know his hand is lands as he searches up a Hallowed Fountain, and a Jace Architect of Thought, which is not going to save him right now.
And part of the power level from Death Shadow is also just coming from mana efficiency. John has used all of his mana for every turn of the game, with the exception of leading up 1 on this turn. big draw there for Perez.
Oh, is it?
That's a big one. Still not out of the woods.
No, we still got some Magic to play here. This just allows him to keep playing as Supreme Verdict rolls off the top of his deck at about the perfect time. But as you mentioned, still not out of the woods, as here's another copy of Death's Shadow. And now Julian will pass the turn back over to Perez. Perez will draw. Again, we know he's got Jace. Didn't get a great look at what else he drew, but he's going to play Jace. This might be a stubborn denial. It is. Here's a Glacial Fortress, pass the turn back. Now that Death Shadow is a 7/7. Here is an attack. Sacrifice that, and that is going to take care of this particular game. So Julian John is going to win game number 1 here over Raymond Perez. Even a top deck Supreme Verdict, not good enough to get him that game.
Top deck Supreme Verdict on 4 and a top deck Path to Exile on turn 2, which might have been the best card in his opening hand had he drawn it. So Perez with some good top decks there, but just too efficient and too much discard from John's side of the table. Grixis
Death Shadow up a game here very quickly against blue-white controls. These players go to the sideboard. We will start with Raymond Future Pro Perez and his 15 cards. He's got 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Stony Silence, 2 Dispel, and here come the fun ofs. In Timely Reinforcements, Blessed Alliance, Flash Freeze, Elspeth Sun's Champion, a Condemn, a Supreme Verdict, a Celestial Purge, a Grafdigger's Cage, and a Relic Progenitus. I know you've been away for a while, so we're going to see if you still got the sideboard and chops.
Well, to me, the questionable cards in this matchup, I'm sure he'll bring in, but might be a little dodgy, are the reactive cards that you can't just cast, like Condemn or Blessed Alliance. Those cards are powerful if they work the right way, but they line up pretty poorly against discard. I still think they're worth bringing in. I'd obviously bring in the extra copy of Supreme Verdict here. The Celestial Purge, I think, is quite good. The copy of Relic of Progenitus is an easy one. And I like the Elspeth Sun's Champion. It is hard to get to, but that card, if you can actually get it onto the battlefield, it's lights out.
How interested are you in Rest in Peace? Obviously, you're going to be playing against Tasigur and Gurmag Angler, but you are also a Snapcaster Mage deck yourself.
Probably good enough to bring in. I think Death Shadow leverages his graveyard more than Perez does. If Perez is able to drive the game out, he can afford to be down his Snapcaster Mages. And I think it's a valuable tool for dragging out the game.
Let's go to Julian John, the Grixis Death Shadow sideboard with 2 Nile Spellbombs, 2 Young Pyromancer, 2 Kozilek's Return, 2 Ceremonious Rejection. He's got some fun ofs. An additional copy of Stubborn Denial, Eclectic Brutality, a Disdainful Stroke, Liliana the Veil, Liliana the Last Hope. He split the difference on the Planeswalkers, along with a Teamer Battle Rage and an Engineered Explosives.
I would kind of want more threat cards here. I think the Young Pyromancers are solid, although seeing Jace Architect of Thought, maybe not so much. I'm interested in the Disdainful Stroke and the 2 copies of Liliana.
Yeah, Liliana going to be really good in this matchup.
Both of them are solid.
Yeah. Going to be good. Now, we don't have the new Planeswalker rule in effect yet, so they can't be side by side, but they'll be good on their own in various spots if they do show up in one of these sideboarded games. We get ready here for game number 2 in just a moment. We are going to talk about the StarCityGames.com weekly sale, which is going to end on Monday. And hey, it's a Modern tournament. Pretty good time to save on your Modern favorites.
Exactly. Head over to StarCityGames.com once a week to check out the weekly sale. There's a new one that goes up Monday, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. So make sure to be checking back once a week to see what the new sale is. Right now, up to 25% off select Modern favorites, which, as you mentioned, synergizes very nicely with the broadcast.
You know what that is?
It's just really good
That's good marketing. That's good marketing right there. Go to StarCityGames.com/weekly sale. I can't take credit. I didn't think of it. I wish I could say that was my idea, but I just saw that everything lined up perfect.
Right.
How could we not talk about that? I'll tell you what, 25% off your Rift Bolts, it's big savings.
It is.
That's big savings.
I already have my Rift Bolts.
I know you do. I know you do. No burn for you? Could you burn in this metagame?
I think it's fine. I think the Death Shadow matchup is really intricate and comes down to a lot of there's a lot of play and a lot of counterplay to the matchup, which is why every good burn player says, I think the matchup's pretty good for me, and every good Death Shadow player says, I think the matchup's
really good for me.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Death Shadow being, I don't know if it's the best deck, but one of the best decks in Modern, and the kind of play patterns that it has, and there are games where you will not attack against it, and it leaves up some wonky things that you're supposed to care about. Is that a good thing?
I think in small doses. I don't mind, especially when you get to the larger formats. Some of the decks have like pretty non-intuitive play patterns. You play against Dredge, you need to destroy your own creatures to get bridge from below the graveyard, that sort of stuff. I think all that can be good in small doses. I don't think it's good to be the foundational play pattern against the best deck in the format.
Okay. Like I had that, I wrote that article at the beginning of this week where I got Thoughtseize. My opponent Thoughtseized my Obstinate Baloth on turn 1. And now I was left with the decision. First of all, they willingly took it. And then I was left with the decision of if I'm supposed to attack with on turn 2, bring my opponent from 13 down to 9. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think those kind of decisions, obviously you don't see that sort of stuff in Standard or Vintage or at least not yet in Legacy. But I think it makes for some interesting decisions and some interesting gameplay.
Right, and that's why I'm speaking to frequency being a big part of it.
Sure.
It's okay for some decks to have some non-intuitive play patterns or force you into some weird spots, but I'm less certain it's good for that to be the best deck in the format.
Okay. Glacial Fortress is where Raymond Perez will start. For Julian John, he'll cycle a Street Wraith. He'll sacrifice a Bloodstained Mire, likely going to go down to 15. And I see a Thoughtseize over there, so let's make it 13. Now that's how it's done. Logic Knot, Detention Sphere, Serum Visions, let's make it 2 Detention Spheres, and Gideon of the Trials is the hand that Raymond Perez has.
Gideon of Trials, potentially a big beneficiary to the new Planeswalker rule rolling down the pipeline a little bit.
Ah yes, the emblem.
Yeah.
You can just be a Gideon we can just change it to Gideon Control.
Now, Perez is not playing that many Gideons, only has the 2 copies of Gideon of the Trials plus a Gideon Jura, but you could probably squeeze in another, maybe have one more on the board.
Maybe find a little room.
Yeah.
Julian going to consult his hand before selecting a card with Thoughtseize. Again, Gideon of the Trials, 2 Detention Spheres, a Serum Visions, and a Logic Knot. Serum Visions, I imagine, looks pretty attractive right now to select.
Yeah, I mean, Perez's hand is a little choppy and needs, double blue and some mana generally. So there's some charm in taking the cantrip. The Detention Spheres are also quite good. I mean, a way that you can beat Death Shadow, removal that exiles is at a premium. So I'm guessing it was a choice between either the Visions and one of the Detention Spheres, and John going with the cantrip.
A Plains there for Perez that John already knew about, and that'll end his turn. We go back over to Julian John. Looks like he may have picked up a Tasker for the turn. He does have a Serum Visions, and he'll play a Bloodstained Mire. Julian also with a Stubborn Denial in hand at the moment, and he'll sacrifice this Bloodstained Mire, fall down to at least 12. We'll see how low the Death Shadow player does want to go.
What do you think about Street Wraith?
In what context?
It's in the Simian Spirit Guide camp for me of, all right, so I guess we're just doing this. I guess this card gets a pass. Mox Opal, similarly.
So Mox Opal is, to me, Opal is way more powerful than the other 2 cards you mentioned.
Definitely.
Street Wraith doesn't really bother me. It doesn't really bother me.
It's innocuous. It's hard to suss out that it's the source of a lot of the problems.
Like, it's definitely good, but at the same time, a lot of, I don't know. I don't see it as being that big of an issue.
I think even very good Magic players have historically underrated the impact of cantrips.
Oh, for sure.
And what's happening in the games.
I thought Probe was garbage.
Yeah.
But never been more, well, probably been that wrong before.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I was on the Probe train pretty
day
early.
One. day one.
This is not okay.
Yeah.
This is not okay.
A Flooded Strand there for Perez means he's got 3 mana, which means those Detention Spheres are online. Julian John going to play a Thought Scour. Looks like he'll be targeting himself. Yes, 1 is Thought Scour, 2 didn't get a great look at. He'll draw a card. And now we're going to keep it rolling as he picked up a copy of a Liliana of the Veil. There's a Polluted Delta. And we'll see if Julian does want to maybe potentially play this Liliana of the Veil and start to go to work on Raymond Perez's hand a little bit, assuming it does resolve. And of course, Perez does have a Detention Sphere to take care of the problem.
Yeah, now it's a question of how does John want to sequence his various plays here, because he knows now that there are 2 copies of Detention Sphere and a Logic Knot that are live.
Mm-hmm.
The ceiling on John's play there of taking a Serum Vision is if Perez just misses a land drop, if he doesn't have double blue or a 3rd land, he's just in a lot of trouble. Now, with Perez having drawn a Flooded Strand, he's got to figure out how to sequence all this stuff.
As you mentioned, he's got to work through Logic Knot and some other things. So Death Shadow has arrived. And we're going to be delving into something here as well. One doesn't just grab their graveyard like that on accident. And it looks like it's going to be Tassiger, the Golden Fang. So 2 large threats, and it looks like a Stubborn Denial in hand to protect them. Perez will sacrifice his Flooded Strand. We'll see what land he wants to search up. He'll go with a basic island. And he's already reaching. What's he got here? He's got a Logic Knot that's going to go after Tasigur. Tasigur will be countered as he delves away 2 cards, and now Perez will untap and very quickly draw. You have to imagine if Perez is playing a deck like Blue-White Control. He's played against Grixis Death Shadow a number of times, either in real life or in person, as here is a Detention Sphere. Polluted Delta will be sacrificed in response to the Detention Sphere, so we might see that Stubborn Denial right now. Now, I know that Blue-White Control is a deck that players do go towards to attempt to beat Death Shadow.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, Supreme Verdict in particular is one of the better cards in the format conceptually. And you can load up with a lot of cheap interaction if you want it.
There is Stubborn Denial.
But as we saw in the first game, there's a certain volume of discard where it doesn't really matter what your card choices were.
Here comes Death Shadow. And this is a Condemn.
Out of the sideboard.
Yep. We'll take a look at it, since Julian's doing that as well. That one's an oldie but a goodie.
Great in this matchup. The issue with it is just it's sitting in your hand and you're waiting, and that's not great against a deck with discard spells and counter spells. But if you actually can get it off, it's excellent.
And now here is Liliana of the Veil. The very powerful Planeswalker is going to go up to 4. Julian will discard, so will Perez. Now Perez, you see he's looking at D-Sphere and he's looking at Gideon. And this is a difficult decision, Patrick.
Yeah, this is so. The one option is discard Gideon and Detention Sphere, the Liliana, and go on with life. The other is discard the Detention Sphere and hope to draw untap land number 5 and just put Gideon on the table.
That's a 3-mana Gideon.
Oh,
so he can just cast that if he wanted to.
Oh, if that's the case, then I think it's pretty easy just to take the Liliana and play on. Even though Perez just has so many really good draws in his deck, I'm happy sort of just playing the 1-for-1 game and dragging it out.
Okay. Here's Thought Scour again. 2 cards going to the graveyard. New card drawn. Looks like Snapcaster Mage. There's also a Gurmag Angler in hand here for Julian John. And this is what makes playing against Death Shadow so difficult, because you're able to reload the graveyard very quickly to be able to play more delve threats. So you already saw a Tasker be cast this game. Now we're going to see a Gurmag Angler. And of course, Snapcaster Mage and Kolaghan's Command mean that you can go pretty long against decks like Blue-White Control.
It's subtle, but so much of this deck's power comes from it's just getting the better end of the land spell equation than its opponent a huge percentage of the time. You have so many cantrips, so much variance reduction, so many things you can do for 0 and 1 mana.
Makes it hard to beat. Getting into the trials here off the top of Raymond Perez's deck. 3 mana, 3 loyalty, but it's a 4 loyalty right now because until your next turn, which will of course be Raymond Perez's next turn, prevent all damage target permanent would deal. That means Gurmag Angler, you're not going to be doing all that much. Now, this is a nice fit in this deck. 3 mana, doesn't die to Supreme Verdict. A lot of upside to this card here.
And also seems solid in this kind of matchup where they're often on one big threat. And especially if you're backing up with removal spells, then the getting into trials just buys you a lot of breathing space.
Kolaghan's Command is going to deal 2 there and return a Tasigur. And Julian John's going to simply pass the turn back. So not a lot done there on that turn for Julian John. Gideon's going to go up, and Perez is going to simply pass the turn back 1 card in hand. Now again, Julian John's hand, rather good. Snapcaster Mage, Tasker, he returned with Kolaghan's Command. Stubborn Denial, you can see. That's obviously on line 2. So right now, Gideon's doing a nice job of, I would say, holding off the Angler, but not much past that. Now here's Tasigur.
And now Perez has to come up with an answer card because the Gideon's not going to be able to hold off both threats. But a Supreme Verdict here, you can start to see the pieces of the game plan here. It may not come together.
Perez may have Supreme Verdict. He's going to play Hallowed Fountain untapped. He'll plus there, simply pass the turn back.
So that's land number 6 for the Colonnade?
It is.
But I don't know what the block here is exactly.
Smart attack here by Julian John. Attacking with both creatures.
Playing around a Blessed Alliance?
Indeed.
Very sharp.
Very smart attack there from your Grixis Death Shadow player. So this is an attempted activating colonnade. This is interesting. He'll block Tasigur.
I mean, Perez's stance might be, I have to just draw Supreme Verdict right now, and this is the best play if the top card of my deck is Supreme Verdict.
Okay. Just do whatever it takes to keep Gideon alive?
Right.
Okay.
He wants to have a leftover in the event that he rips a sweeper.
Here's Relic of Progenitor. It's a little late.
Also, if he chump blocks that turn, he's drawing to a removal spell. If he draws a Detention Sphere or a Condemn, he's back to parity.
Sure. Snapcaster Mage?
Right.
Something like that?
Yeah, so there are some draws.
Here's a Relic activation.
Yeah, I think that chump block there is the best at leveraging his best draws, and right now he needs his best draws.
It looks strange on the surface.
Right.
Just throwing away a land like that and taking 2 to do so.
But I think that was a solid block.
Gurmag Angler has been shut down here. Now here is, well, there's Blessed Alliance. So that was the correct play there from Julian John.
Really sharp.
Yep. And now we're going to see Stubborn Denial. The attempt was to make Julian sacrifice creature and gain a life. Gideon's going to fall down to 1. Stubborn Denial takes care of the Blessed Alliance. Past that turn back. Julian John still with Snapcaster Mage in hand for Stubborn Denial. The Relic will be activated. Graveyards will go away. Perez will draw a card. He's on the hunt for Supreme Verdict. Cryptic Command probably wouldn't be so bad either. Gideon's going to go up to 2 and shut down the Angler. This is a Snapcaster Mage. Julian John hell-bent on taking care of this Gideon, it looks like.
You know, now with no graveyard, might as well just make sure that you can play through 1 removal spell and get the Gideon off the table.
Cycle Street Wraith. Well, Julian John, he's going to fall down to 10. New card coming. Picked up a Polluted Delta to go along with the Snapcaster Mage and a Death Shadow in hand. There's the Delta. Here come the beatdowns. Going to go after Gideon. This is cycling irrigated farmland. Gideon down.
So Perez lost the battle there to keep Gideon on the table, but he's still very much drawing to Supreme Verdict.
Supreme Verdict or Elspeth, both good, assuming Elspeth's in his deck.
Yeah, I think that Elspeth has to come in this matchup. You know, it's hard to get on the table, but both the plus and the minus are excellent.
But Perez is having to live off the top of his deck right now, while Julian John is having no problem finding cards. He's going to activate Tasker, sleight of hand, and a Polluted Delta will go to the graveyard. Here's Path to Exile. That's going to take care of Tasker, while Julian John's going to get back a Street Wraith. So he'll search up a basic. There's the basic island.
Also pretty crazy that, you know, Perez is the control deck, but John's also winning the battle over accumulating raw material.
Well, Perez doesn't feel like the control deck.
No,
I'll tell you that much.
John's generating much more card advantage.
Yeah.
Spending his mana much more efficiently.
He's got all the cards in his hand. Look like he may have picked up a copy of Thoughtseize. He's going to clear the path with the powerful discard spell. It was a Dispel.
And that speaks, you know, I mentioned during the sideboarding, the reactive cards that you can't just cast, they have their moments, and the Condemn was certainly good for Perez earlier in the game, but they often just get stranded or are vulnerable to discard spells.
Death Shadow here now. Here's a Serum Visions. Path to Exile going to take care of the Death Shadow.
Odd to me that if you were going to do that, that you would give John a draw step in the first place.
Sure. John will draw. Now he'll scry 2. Stubborn Denial has shown its face again. He'll keep both of these cards. Beatdowns. Perez going to fall down to 3. Any Supreme Verdicts to be had here, folks? That's the big question. Elspeth, too. Julian John will just pass the turn back. Perez will draw. Ding, ding, ding. That'll clear those up. Again, this is a situation where it's going to let him continue to play on. Don't know if it's going to win him the game, but he'll get to keep playing. Here's Snapcaster Mage. Young Pyromancer's been found, a card you felt should come in.
Yeah, I liked it in the board. I mean, just generally could use some more threat cards. My concern was just because of Jace Architect, I thought maybe it would not come in.
Sure. Well, there's the 2-1. Perez will draw. And he'll extend the hand as he picked up a land. He cannot beat those two very powerful 2-drops. As Julian John going to win this match over Raymond Perez, 2-0. Grixis Death Shadow will take care of blue-white control.